On this episode of 26 Minutes with Dr. Warren Siegel, the spotlight is on our feet. Dr. Arthur Passik, a well-known podiatrist, is here to guide us through the essentials of basic podiatric care. Together, we will discover the secrets to preventing foot problems before they start, discuss innovative treatments for foot disorders, and reveal how our feet are a mirror to our health. Tune in for an enlightening discussion on taking the right steps towards optimal foot care. Dr. Passik, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. Let's start from the beginning. Where are you from? How did you become a podiatrist? What's involved in becoming a podiatrist?
I'm from here. I'm from Brooklyn. I grew up across the street. I did my residency, part of my externship at Coney Island Hospital, and then got on staff back in 1990. Podiatry was something that I was looking at when I was looking at medical school and osteopathic school, chiropractic school, and it just seemed to offer certain advantages that made it preferable to me all those years ago.
So if you decide to become a podiatrist, you go to a school specifically for podiatry?
Yes. There are approximately, I believe, 8 podiatric medical colleges in the country. One of them is in New York. I went to the New York school back in 1984 to 1988, and then I did 2 years of surgical residency through the foot clinics of New York and their affiliated hospitals. Today, there's 4 years of medical training, and then there's 3 years of residency. And that's what it takes, not including any fellowships or ultra-specialized training. A lot of years to be a podiatrist, just like any other medical specialist.
It's interesting. So let's get rid of a myth. The myth is a podiatrist is a doctor, right?
Correct.
So your specialty is feet. Now, how high does my foot go? Is it above the ankle, below the knee, above the toes? Where does your specialty begin? Where does it end?
It's a good question. That depends on where in the country you are. In New York, for the longest time, it was below the ankle, below the malleoli. Fairly recently, there has been an increase in the scope of practice in New York with additional training. The ankle is involved, but there are places in the country where it has always been the ankle. Podiatrists commonly do ankle fixations, ankle trauma. Some parts of the country, the scope of practice is all the way up to the knee, but in New York, it's the foot.
So basically, if I have a problem with my feet, anywhere from the ankle down, I should be seeing a podiatrist?
It's not a bad idea to. Podiatrists have a good understanding of the medicine, of the mechanics, and that's why we go to school so long. There's a lot to know. It's one small area of the body, but it's an area that takes a tremendous beating throughout our lifetime, and things go wrong. It's a machine that can fail, it can overload, it can hurt, it can break, it can develop diseases like any other part of the body, and it is a good idea. If you're not sure what you're dealing with, come to a podiatrist.
Really interesting. When I think of a hospital, podiatry is probably the last doctor you think of. You think of the cardiologist, you think of the neurologist, but you're making a good point. From the moment I started to learn to walk a very long time ago, I've been on my feet. No wonder they hurt all the time, right? Are general doctors, is my internist able to treat anything with my feet, or do I need a referral to a podiatrist? How do I get to see you?
Internists can, some do. Most of them make referrals. Through the primary care doctor coordinates all the specialist care, and we get a tremendous amount of consultations, referrals, requests for care from the medical doctors, from all the specialties, all the subspecialties. They know if it's the foot, we should take a look.
So let's start at the beginning. At what age should a child get their first pair of shoes? I get that question all the time.
There's a lot of controversy about it. My opinion, see, what I tell you here is my opinion. When a child first starts walking and they start to develop like a more adult gait, like they're walking like with a heel to toe gait, and they have a tendency at that age to be overly flexible. Most of us have a flexibility that lasts our whole lives. The bottom line is the foot was not designed to walk on concrete. It wasn't designed for a hard, flat surface. It was designed to be able to mold to uneven surfaces and then become rigid as the heel comes off the ground and you transfer to the next step. When a child begins to display that type of gait, I like sneakers. I like a good shoe, not too rigid, not too flexible. One of the problems is that even at that age, the sneakers are this big. They're very expensive, and the children, they outgrow them rapidly. So I like to see when they're walking, if they're walking outside, if they're running around the house, having a pair of sneakers on would be a good idea, in my opinion, if you can afford it.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about the different types of shoe in a few minutes. Are there foot problems in children that a podiatrist should be seeing children early and getting a referral from their pediatrician early on? What are the common things that children develop?
Well, uncommonly is the stuff that's more important. It's a very good question. We have training in congenital deformities. There are children that are born with flat feet that are pathologic, like calcaneal valgus, or there's a condition where there's a rigid flat foot called convex pes plano valgus or vertical talus, where the foot is that's a surgical situation. There is club foot. We do see a good amount of club foot. We verify that it is a club foot on radiographic examination.
So those are the x-rays that you do?
Yes, the x-rays tell us a story. A lot of times children, the foot is normal, but they have that C-shaped legs, and the foot is kind of like curled in before they start walking, and parents always get upset when they look. It's not normal to them, but it's normal before they start walking. Some of the things they will outgrow. Some of the angulations of the leg and the foot will derotate naturally over time, and some of them need to be looked at. We've been consulted for patients to be seen like 3 days after they're born. The earlier you get to certain congenital deformities, the better. That's usually treated with casting, like where you can, when they're that flexible, you can mold out certain deformities over time. And if they're not, and if the deformities are persistent after a certain age, it becomes problematic. It becomes a surgical situation.
So it's interesting, you said you're a podiatrist, you deal with the foot, and yet you're looking at the entire leg. You're looking at the way the leg is shaped, how it's being held when the child stands up. So it sounds like you're not just looking at the foot, you're not just trained to take care of the foot, you're looking at the structure above it. Is that correct?
I agree. My belief is that the foot, the ankle, the lower leg, the upper leg, the hip, the back, it's all one gearing system. It's a machine, and it's an incredibly complex machine, but it is a machine, and it's all interconnected. Problems from the foot can make problems in the back. Problems in the back can lead to problems in the foot. So there has to be a consideration all the way up and down the line. So you are examining range of motions and tightness. You're looking for asymmetries from one foot to another. You're looking for motions that are not moving, like there's blockages. Is there a bony block? Is there a spasticity? And you're looking all the way up to the hip, at least I do.
Very interesting. So here's part of the machine that we neglect all the time. What are the most common reasons somebody says, I have a foot problem? Is it pain, or is it as we get older, certain things happen as part of the aging process? At what point should people say, I need to see my podiatrist?
Usually it's pain. The feet, contrary to myth, they're not supposed to hurt. You know, you wear shoes that are too dressy, you do certain activities that are too overtaxing for the musculoskeletal system, things start to fatigue, things start to hurt. There are things that a podiatrist can do. If something is out of balance, it can be balanced. If range of motions are too much, they can be limited. The feet can be put into a more ideal position. Most of the time, it's pain.
That's interesting. So pain is not normal in your feet.
It's not. The foot was not supposed to hurt, and the pain is a symptom. The pain is a sign. The pain is something that shouldn't be ignored and shouldn't be walked through or exercised through. It should be evaluated. Sometimes the person themselves understands that there's something that's not right. The shoe is not strong enough. The shoe doesn't have enough shock absorbing capacity. The foot is not moving in the right way. And sometimes people do things for themselves. They change their shoes. If you have the money to spend, there is excellent shoe gear on the market today, sneakers and walking shoes mostly. There are custom-made orthotics that could be made. There are things that people can buy in the store for themselves that they could put into their shoes. People can be very ingenious on their own. When it's becoming a problem that's more, it's best to let a specialist look at it and let someone look at it with their training behind it to make further sense out of it.
So when you talk about orthotics, you talk about those things I see in the drugstore where you put it in the shoe and then you walk around and it's going to hold up my heel, or it's going to hold up my arches. I never really understood. Can you explain a little bit about what orthotics do?
That's where the training comes in. That's why it's important to get a professional evaluation. The stuff that you can buy in the store are simple arch supports, and arch supports are good. In my opinion, the majority of foot-related problems come from a foot that is not properly supported, that doesn't have the muscular, the bony, the ligamentous strength to keep the arch up when you're walking. The arch is not supposed to collapse down all the way when you're walking. That's a fault. It's not supposed to do that. And unfortunately, most of us are born with that vulnerability. Most of us keep that vulnerability our whole lives. So the need for proper support is for our whole lives. Now, there are simple arch supports you can buy in the store. There is a good amount of support that comes with today's sneakers if you buy the right kind and the right type of sneaker or walking shoe. And then there are custom-made orthotics, which attempt in younger people who can tolerate it to try and bring the foot back into an ideal normal where the heel is set and hitting the ground at the right angle, and the front part of the foot can only roll in a certain amount, and you have to compensate if there's any tightness in the Achilles tendon. The Achilles tendon tightness or equinus is responsible for a whole host of podiatric problems. So an orthotics attempt to address more than simply supporting the arch, at least in theory.
So you talk about the importance of shoes. I remember growing up as a kid, women always wore these big high heels. I never even understood how they could walk in them. And I don't see that anymore. Now I see everybody walking around in flip-flops, in Crocs. Can you talk about, what do you think about flip-flops, Crocs as a shoe?
I have a pair of Crocs. I wear them in the operating room. They're good for standing. I don't find them particularly supportive enough for my overly flexible foot for large amounts of walking, but they're good for standing. It's got a rudimentary arch molded into it. Flip-flops are for walking on the sand at the beach. They offer no mechanical support. There are still many women who wear high heels. In my opinion, anything over half an inch of heel lift starts to imitate gastrocsolial equinus, the tightness of the Achilles tendon, and it's hard to explain why, but when that tendon is tight and it wants to bring the foot down, it unlocks the foot. The foot has two functions. When the heel contacts the ground during walking, it's contacting with a force of 6 times body weight. So there is a need for the foot to be loose, to be able to model to the surface and absorb the shock. And then the front part of the foot comes down, the heel changes its angle, and like a key in a lock, it locks the foot up in preparation to be, according to the physics, to be efficient in transferring the force from one foot and one leg to another as the heel comes off the ground during propulsion.
This is fascinating. I mean, I never think of all the mechanics involved in actually walking, but it also makes me understand a little bit why today's sneakers are so expensive. I mean, my kids look at sneakers. I don't think they've ever looked at a pair of sneakers under $250. Yeah. If they're more expensive, are they better for my feet?
It's another good question. I have a simple test when it comes to any shoe or sneaker or boot. The shoe should not be able to be bent into a pretzel. If you could take a shoe that is too flexible, it means that, especially in the middle, where like you could bend it in the middle all the way, it's not supporting the arch. So the arch is coming down and all the pathomechanics start to come into play. Sneakers that were expensive used to be expensive because they were handmade. They were made to be solid. They bent only at the ball of the foot, only at the break, which meant that from the ball of the foot back to the heel, it was solid, helping the foot to stay solid when the heel came off the ground. This is where a lot of the mechanical problems come in if there's too much flexibility. Today, all of the sneaker companies are working with a light, very cushiony material. It's obviously easy to manufacture. People love it. I love it. I have a pair. They're very light. They're very cushiony. Heavy sneakers are fatiguing. Walking shoes are fatiguing because they're heavier. But the lighter shoes are not strong enough for those of us who need the extra strength. And to be honest, I've always liked a certain type of sneaker, a certain model of sneaker that I am starting to have trouble finding, being that they're still handmade. They're becoming more difficult to find, and they are more expensive. Children, I think it's the brand. It's the commercialism of it, and it is, you pay for that through the nose.
Huge fashion statement.
Yeah. So, since our program is about staying healthy, can you tell our viewers if you had 3 things that you could tell everybody to do to keep their feet healthy, what would that be?
Okay. Check your feet, especially if, we deal a lot with diabetics. We deal a lot with people with neuropathy, with nerve deficits. The ability to feel pain is a gift. And when you lose that gift, very bad things start to happen because you don't know when to pull back when something is hurting. Check your feet, especially if you have a sensory deficit. You're looking for redness, you're looking for swelling, any blisters. There's not supposed to be blisters. There's not supposed to be pain in the nails or the toes. The shoe is not supposed to touch the toe or the nail because it can do nothing but make trouble. For people like me with very flexible feet, with flat feet, the shoe becomes very important. Sneakers and walking shoes are where it's at today. The hundreds of millions of dollars that went into research to make a sneaker that was not a Keds, not a deck shoe, to make it into a real walking device, went into sneakers and walking shoes, not into women's dress shoes. So the right shoe makes things function so much better. And I guess the last thing, I don't like to self-advertise, but if there is a problem that you feel you're losing control of it, or you don't understand it, or you can't get on top of it, seek help. That's what we're here for. That's what we get paid for.
So I guess the bottom line is take care of your feet by checking your feet. Don't ignore them. Make sure to pay attention when they're telling you something, and the way they speak to you is by pain. And 3, speak to your primary care doctor. Ask for a referral to a podiatrist. Can I just make an appointment to a podiatrist, or do I need a referral?
Certain insurances, you can just go. You don't need the primary doctor to be administering over referrals. But in our system, mostly it's referrals. The diabetics, it is automatic. The medical doctors want the diabetic seen at a minimum of once a year, check the neurovascular status, and then they come back. If there's no problem, they come back in a year. The tests are repeated. We're looking for progression of problems, especially with the nerves and arteries, things that maybe we could get out in front of before it becomes a catastrophe. A lot of what we deal with is ulcerations and bone infections and gangrene, and we do, unfortunately, an awful lot of amputation. And it would be nice, the medical doctors are trying. They're trying to get out in front of the problem by letting us have a preventative check, and then that patient is classified. Can they come back once a year? Can they come back in 6 months? Do they need to be seen next week? Problems that are identified, patients are brought back in for continued follow-up and workup as they need it. And I'm hoping that it's making a difference. Like I said, we still see the bad side of non-compliance and diabetes and poor circulation and neuropathy. But we have people that go for decades. There are people that are 80 years old whose circulation and their neurovascular status is better than mine. And it's a tribute to them, being able to take care of yourself.
But it does sound like if you're diabetic, you're saying you automatically should see a podiatrist every single year minimum. Are there other medical conditions that would put you at higher risk for foot problems?
Quite a few. There are, neurological problems like people who have had a stroke, people with cerebral palsy. There are people with Parkinson's. We have a vested interest in people who have the type of medical problems that give them instability. Falls is a very big thing today. People fall. It's not like you fall and that's it and you get up. It's like people fall, they break hips, they break ankles, they break their skull. Instability of gait is a very important thing, and all of the medical conditions that contribute to gait abnormality or instability of gait or risk of fall, they should come, because there are things we can do, both with the shoes, what goes into the shoes, and then external assistive devices. You'd be surprised. It's not something that's talked about a lot in other specialties, but I see a patient, I watch them walk in, I don't like the way they walk. I'm offering a cane, I'm offering a walker. If they're using a cane and they're not stable, if they tell me that they tripped 3 times in the last 3 months, one fall could do you in, so it's taken very seriously.
This is so helpful. All of a sudden, I want to make an appointment to see my podiatrist. But I have to ask you, so often people complain of these spasms in their toes that go away by themselves. Is that normal? Is that expected? Is that a sign something is wrong? Should they see their primary care internist? Should they see their podiatrist?
Both. As far as my belief is that the spasms, if it's not due to a vascular problem, like it's not like claudication, it's like people get spasms in the legs, and that's because the circulation is, the muscles are screaming for oxygen and cause like a pain that stops when you stop walking. That is a whole topic unto itself. It is an emergent topic, something that needs to be followed up. Vascular doctor usually needs to be consulted. The usual spasms and cramping and burning and pain that occur in the toes, my feeling is that is mostly due to overflexibility. It is due to wearing a shoe that is not properly balancing the foot, and the muscles are overworking. And like when you run a marathon, if you reach a certain point where the muscles have used up all of their aerobic ability, they start to operate without the use of oxygen. There's lactic acid, there's cramping, there's spasming. And the toes can do that too, and the arch. And I've been getting that lately, and it's very, very painful. It's a spasm that's sometimes hard to break. But I feel it's musculoskeletal a lot of the times. The need for support, the need to take the pressure off the muscles by supporting the bony structure so that the muscles don't have to overwork trying to do it. They start working in points during the cycle of gait, the gait cycle, that they're not supposed to be working at, and they're working all the time. Muscles don't work all the time without spasming. They fail, they fatigue.
What happens What about those times when it happens when you're fast asleep? I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me, and it's woken me up, and I can't break that spasm. Is that something to really be scared about?
I get that too. Again, if it's not due to a neurovascular reason, if it's not due to claudication, if it's due to like a sporting activity, a lot of times muscles can be overworked during the day and you pay at night, like when the temperature drops, your core temperature drops and things start to spasm. And I get that occasionally too. It's very unpleasant to be woken up by that. But again, I feel mostly it is musculoskeletal. There used to be where spasms had to do with like a metabolic problem, like a potassium that was too high or too low that the muscles would go into, or the calcium. And there used to be medications available for that. And then suddenly, like, those medications became, like, there must have been a problem where they went off the market. And it could still be that. It could still be like a metabolic thing where like one of the minerals needs to be adjusted. But the absence of the ability to deal with it with a medication has led us to think more along a musculoskeletal cause of the problem.
Interesting. I have to ask, bunions, hammer toes, I hear these words all the time. Again, those are things that the podiatrist will take care of. Is it always surgery? What's treatments for some of these common things?
Good question. Surgery should always be the last resort. Now, again, this is my own opinion. There are ways to stabilize the foot. It is due to a mechanical problem. It's difficult to explain, but when the foot is too flexible and the arch is coming down, the muscles that are causing spasms by overfiring are not doing a very good job at holding the arch, at sustaining the arch, because the forces are just great. But what they are doing is they're pulling the toes out of alignment. And bunions and hammer toes are a result of that. In the classical biomechanical sense, hammer toes are actually quite complicated, and they can come from a number of different biomechanical deficits. There are neuromuscular variety of hammer toes, and balancing out the foot and trying to neutralize the forces that are pulling these bones out of alignment is the primary first treatment. Sneakers, orthotics, surgery is a last resort, and surgery is complex. Foot surgery, in my opinion, it tends to be more than people think it is. It's bone surgery. A lot of times you can't walk on it for several weeks to upwards of 2 months after. It's an investment of your time to have foot surgery, to make something right.
This is fascinating. Clearly a part of my body that I've neglected for a long time. Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. We thank you for tuning in and learning alongside of us. For more information about our show, please call 718-510-2103 or visit www.zormed.com. Stay updated and engaged with South Brooklyn Health by visiting us online at www.newyorknychealthandhospitals.org, Brooklyn-Health. This broadcast was brought to you by Brick Media in partnership with South Brooklyn Health.